Part 5. Aftermath and Legacy. 3 days after the battle, Jiwoo stood beside Lieutenant Jiho examining the damaged power generators. The human engineer had volunteered to help repair the colony's infrastructure, and Jiwoo was amazed at how much he was learning. "See this conduit here?" Jiho said, pointing at a burned section. "We can reroute the power flow through this secondary line. It's not in your original design, but it'll work until we can get you proper replacement parts." Jiwoo nodded, watching carefully as Jiho made the modifications. The human worked with practiced efficiency, his hands moving with confidence. "Where did you learn all this?" "Earth Academy of Engineering," Jiho replied. 5 years of study, then another 3 in practical service. "You've got good instincts, though. You kept these generators running way past their design limits. That took skill." The praise made Jiwoo uncomfortable but also proud. He had done everything he could during the siege, and now he was learning even more from his new friend. All across Haven Colony, similar scenes played out. Human medical teams worked alongside Valoran doctors treating the wounded. Marine engineers helped repair damaged buildings. Supply ships from the fleet delivered food, medicine, and construction materials. The humans had come as warriors, but they stayed as helpers. In the central plaza, children played for the first time in over a week. Both Valoran and human. A young girl named Hyejin, daughter of one of the Marine officers, taught Valoran children a hand-clapping game from Earth. They laughed together, the sound beautiful after so much fear and silence. Sergeant Bora watched the children play, a smile on her face. She had volunteered to stay behind when most of the fleet departed, helping with security and reconstruction. The truth was she had grown attached to this place and these people. Sergeant Bora, a young Valoran boy, ran up to her holding something in his hands. "I made this for you." It was a small carved figure shaped like a human in armor. The craftsmanship was crude but made with obvious care. "Thank you," Bora said, genuinely touched. She knelt down to the boy's level. "What's your name?" "I'm Daehyun," the boy said proudly. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Bora felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You're already brave, Daehyun. You survived the siege. That takes real courage." In the council chambers, Yoonji met with Captain Do-hyun and Admiral Tae-hyung, who had returned to finalize arrangements. On the table between them lay a formal document, drafted in both Valoran and human languages. "This treaty establishes a formal alliance between Valora and Earth," Yoonji read aloud. "Our peoples will stand together, share knowledge and resources, and come to each other's aid in times of need." She looked up at the humans. "We have so little to offer. You saved us and we can barely repay you." "You don't need to repay us," Tae-hyung said firmly. "That's not why we came. We came because it was the right thing to do." Do-hyun nodded in agreement. "Besides, friendship isn't a transaction. We help you because you needed help. If you want to help us someday, we'll accept it gratefully. But there's no debt here." Yoonji signed the treaty, her hand steady. It was the beginning of something new, something important. News of humanity's intervention had already spread across the galaxy. Other species were watching, wondering about these newcomers who fought not for conquest but for justice. In orbit above Talon 7, the human fleet prepared for departure. Most of the ships would return to their regular duties, but a small task force would remain, ensuring the Krath didn't return. Captain Hyunwoo had volunteered to lead the garrison force. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Hana received a communication from Earth Command. She read it twice to make sure she understood, then brought it to Captain Do-hyun. "Sir, you need to see this." Do-hyun read the message, his eyebrows rising. "They want me back on Earth to testify before the Defense Committee. Something about unauthorized military action and violation of jurisdictional protocols." "Are they going to court-martial you?" Hana asked, worried. "Probably going to try," Do-hyun said with a slight smile. "Worth it, though." Yuna, his first officer, overheard the conversation. "Sir, for what it's worth, the entire crew will testify on your behalf. We all made the choice to come here. We all knew the risks. I appreciate that, Commander. But this was my decision, my responsibility." What Do-hyun didn't know was that public opinion on Earth had already turned in his favor. Video footage from the battle had been broadcast across human space. People had seen the desperate colonists, the human Marines defending them, the fleet arriving like an avenging storm. They had heard Yoonji's grateful words, seen Valoran children playing with human soldiers. The politicians might want to reprimand Captain Do-hyun for breaking protocol. But the people of Earth saw a hero. Minho walked through his research station surveying the damage. Many of his plants had been destroyed in the fighting, years of work lost, but some had survived, protected by the human defensive line, and the humans had brought seeds from Earth, offering to help him restart his research. He held a small tomato plant in his hands, a gift from one of the marine biologists. It was a simple thing, but it represented something larger. Connection, understanding, the beginning of shared knowledge between two species. On the Thunder's Wrath, Lieutenant Jiho performed final diagnostics on the plasma lance. The weapon had performed beyond expectations, but it had also burned out several critical systems in the process. It would need major modifications before it could be used again. Worth it, though, he muttered to himself. That one shot had ended the space battle, saved countless lives. Sometimes breaking a weapon to protect people was the right choice. Admiral Tae-hyung stood in his quarters writing his official report. He knew his decision to divert the fleet would be controversial. Some would praise him, others would condemn him. The military loved its rules and regulations, its proper channels and command structures. But Tae-hyung had seen too much death in his career. Too many times when help arrived too late because someone insisted on following protocol. He had promised himself after Hendra Station that he would never let that happen again if he had the power to prevent it. He had kept that promise. Let them hold their hearings and investigations. Let the politicians argue about jurisdiction and sovereignty. He had saved 50,000 lives. That was all that mattered. A week later, the main fleet departed Talon 7. The Valorans gathered to watch them go, waving farewell to their saviors. Children held signs drawn with messages of thanks. Adults stood in silent respect. As the ships lifted into orbit, Yoonji stood with Jiwoo and Minho, watching the sky. "Do you think they'll come back?" Jiwoo asked. "I think they'll always come if we need them," Yoonji replied. "That's what friends do." Across the galaxy, the story of Haven Colony spread. The tale of how humanity had crossed space to save strangers, how they had fought against overwhelming odds, how they had shown mercy even to their enemies when the battle was won. Other species took notice. Some were inspired, some were frightened. All of them realized that humanity was not a species to be ignored or dismissed. In the Kraith Dominion, Furkoth faced a military tribunal for his failure. But his testimony about the human fleet, about their weapons and tactics and determination, sent shockwaves through Krath leadership. They had thought themselves the strongest military power in the region. Now they knew there was a new force to be reckoned with. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions, debating what humanity's intervention meant for established treaties and territorial agreements. Some praised the humans for their courage. Others condemned them for interfering in matters that weren't their concern. But down on Talon 7 in the rebuilt colony, none of that political noise mattered. What mattered was that families could sleep safely. Children could play without fear. People could look to the stars with hope instead of terror. Jiwoo stood at his repaired workstation, monitoring the new shield generators the humans had helped install. They were stronger now, better designed, but more importantly, he knew that if the shields ever failed again, if danger ever returned, they wouldn't face it alone. Somewhere out there, humans were watching. Humans who had proven they would cross space itself to help those in need. Bora sat in the garrison commander's office, now officially assigned to Talon 7 for the next year. She looked at the carved figure Daehyun had given her, displayed proudly on her desk. Through the window she could see Valoran and human personnel working together, building something new. Captain Dohyun returned to Earth to face his hearing, but found himself greeted as a hero rather than punished as a rebel. The Defense Committee still held their investigation, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Public pressure had decided the matter before the first session even began. Admiral Tae-hyung received a commendation for his actions, though he cared little for medals and ceremonies. What mattered to him was that his fleet had made a difference. They had saved lives. They had proven that doing the right thing was more important than following the easy thing. On Haven Colony, they built a monument in the central plaza. It showed a Valoran and a human standing together looking toward the sky. The inscription read simply, "When darkness came, they answered. When hope seemed lost, they arrived like thunder. May we never forget those who came from beyond the stars to stand with us." Part 4. The Turning Tide. The Kraith commander stood in his ship's bridge staring at the tactical display in disbelief. His name was Vrakoth, and in 30 years of conquest he had never faced a setback like this. The unknown ships had appeared from nowhere, striking with a speed and violence that caught his entire fleet off guard. "What species is this?" he demanded, his forearms gesturing at the screen. "Where did they come from?" "Unknown, Commander," his intelligence officer replied. "They call themselves humans. We have no records of them in our database. They're relatively new to this region of space." "New," Vrakoth snarled. "New species don't have warships like that. New species don't fight like that." On the screen, another of his battleships exploded under a barrage from the massive human dreadnought. His ground forces were being pushed back on all fronts. His carefully planned invasion was falling apart. "Pull back our ground forces," Vrakoth ordered. "Regroup at the northern staging area, and get me reinforcements from the reserve fleet." All of them. His officers rushed to carry out the orders. Vrakoth would not accept defeat. Not from some unknown species that thought they could interfere with Krath business. He would show these humans what happened to those who stood in his way. On the ground, Jiwoo finally left his station. The sanctuary was secure now, protected by a perimeter of human marines. He walked outside for the first time in days, breathing fresh air that smelled of smoke and ozone from the battle. A human soldier stood nearby, her helmet removed. She had dark hair tied back in a practical style, and her face was covered in dust and sweat. When she saw Jiwoo, she smiled. "Hello," she said in heavily accented but understandable Velaran. "You safe now?" Jiwoo stared at her. "You speak our language?" "Little bit," the soldier replied. She pointed at herself. "Name Bora, we come help." "I'm Jiwoo," he managed to say. "Why did you come? How did you even know we needed help?" Bora's smile widened. "We hear message. We come, simple." But it wasn't simple, and Jiwoo knew it. These humans had traveled across space, risked their lives, fought a brutal battle against an enemy that outnumbered them. All for a colony they didn't know, a species they had probably never even met before. "Thank you," Jiwoo said, and the words felt impossibly small for what he was trying to express. Bora nodded. "You're welcome. Now stay inside. Still fighting." She was right. The battle was far from over. Captain Hyunwoo coordinated his forces from a field command post near the sanctuary. His Marines had established a solid defensive line, but reports were coming in about Krath reinforcements moving into position. "Sir, we've got movement to the north," one of his officers reported. "Looks like they're massing for a counterattack." "Big one." Hyunwoo studied the tactical map. The Krath were committing everything they had left. They couldn't retreat to their ships while the human fleet controlled orbit, so they were going to try to overwhelm the ground forces. "Get me Admiral Tae-hyung," Hyunwoo said. Moments later, the Admiral's face appeared on his display. "What do you need, Captain?" "The Kraith are preparing a major assault on our position, sir. I can hold them, but I need air support." "Lots of it," Tae-hyung nodded. "You'll have it. Every fighter we've got." In orbit, the Admiral issued new orders to his carrier groups. The fighters, which had been supporting ground operations, now formed up for a massive strike. Soman found herself leading over 100 aircraft toward the Kraith staging area. "This is going to be the big one," she told her squadron. "They're throwing everything at our people on the ground." "We don't let it reach them, clear?" "Clearly," Junho responded. The rest of the squadron confirmed as well. They flew north, skimming low over the terrain. Soman could see the Kraith forces assembled below. Thousands of soldiers and hundreds of war machines. It was an intimidating sight, but she had seen worse. All wings, attack pattern Delta. Hit them hard and fast. The human fighters dove like eagles, their weapons blazing. Missiles streaked down, explosions rippling across the Krath formation. The aliens fired back, filling the sky with plasma, but the pilots were too skilled, too fast. They wove through the defensive fire, striking with precision before pulling up and coming around for another pass. On the Thunder's wrath, Admiral Tae-hyung monitored both the ground and space battles simultaneously. The Kraith fleet was regrouping, pulling back to a defensive formation around their flagship. They weren't retreating, not yet, but they were reconsidering their strategy. "Sir, we're detecting FTL signatures," his sensor officer reported. "Multiple contacts. Kraith reinforcements arriving." "How many?" "At least 20 ships, sir." "They're jumping in now." Tae-hyung felt his jaw tighten. 20 fresh ships against his battered fleet. They had already taken damage in the first engagement. This was going to be close. All ships prepare for Phase 2, he ordered. And someone get me engineering. I want to know if our special surprise is ready. In the engineering section of the Thunder's Wrath, Lieutenant Jiho worked frantically on the ship's experimental weapon system. The railgun batteries had worked perfectly, better than expected. But the ship had another weapon, something that had never been tested in actual combat. How's it looking, Jiho? The chief engineer asked. The plasma lance is charged and ready, Jiho replied, checking his readings carefully. But sir, we've never fired this thing at full power. It could work perfectly or it could blow up the ship. Then we better hope it works perfectly. The Admiral's counting on us. The Kraith reinforcements entered the system, their ships spreading out in attack formation. Vrakoth felt relief wash over him as the fleet appeared on his display. Now the odds were in his favor again. All ships advance, he ordered. Target that big human dreadnought. I want it destroyed. The Kraith fleet moved forward, weapons charging. On the Thunder's Wrath, alarms blared as targeting systems locked onto the ship. Multiple missile launches detected, the tactical officer reported. They're targeting us specifically, sir. They want to take out the big threat first, Taehyung said calmly. Smart. But let's show them why that's a bad idea. Jiho, fire the plasma lance. Deep in the ship's core, massive capacitors released their stored energy. The plasma lance, a weapon that focused superheated plasma into a coherent beam, activated for the first time in combat. The entire ship shuddered from the power discharge. A beam of brilliant white light lanced across space, crossing the distance to the Kraith flagship in an instant. It struck the ship's shields and simply burned through them. The beam continued into the hull, melting armor, destroying systems, cutting the massive vessel in half like a knife through paper. For a moment, the entire battlefield went silent. Both sides simply stared at what had just happened. Well, Taehyung said quietly, I guess it works. The Krath fleet hesitated. Their flagship was gone, destroyed by a single shot. The human dreadnought was still there, still functional, and probably ready to fire that devastating weapon again. On the ground, the Kraith assault had stalled. The soldiers saw their ships retreating in orbit. They knew what that meant. Without orbital support, without supplies, without reinforcements, they were trapped on this planet with an enemy that had already proven it could defeat them. Hyunwoo saw the change in the enemy's behavior immediately. They were falling back, their formation breaking apart. Now, he ordered. All units advance. Push them back. The human Marines surged forward, their momentum carrying them across the battlefield. The Krath tried to hold their ground, but their will to fight was breaking. Unit by unit, they began to retreat. In her fighter, Soman pursued a group of Krath transports trying to escape. They're running, she reported. Repeat, the enemy is in full retreat. Let them run, came Admiral Taehyung's voice over the comm. Our objective is to protect the colony, not to chase fleeing enemies. Soman pulled up, watching the Krath forces scatter. Around her, human fighters formed up, victorious. Inside the sanctuary, Yoonji listened to reports from the battlefield. The humans were winning. Against all odds, against an enemy that had seemed invincible, the humans were winning. She found Captain Do-yeon in the communications room, coordinating with his fleet. When he saw her, he stood. It's almost over, he told her. The Krath are retreating. You're safe. Yoonji couldn't speak. She could only nod as tears of relief streamed down her face. Mingyo appeared beside her, having heard the news. Around them, other Valorans began to realize what was happening. They had survived. Thanks to strangers from across the stars, they had survived. Part 3. The storm arrives. The shields fell at dawn on the 7th day. Jiwoo watched his instruments die one by one, the power readings dropping to 0. The blue shimmer that had protected Haven Colony flickered and went dark. He had done everything possible, pushed every system past its breaking point, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was ever going to be enough. Shields are down, he reported quietly into his communicator. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. They're down. Outside, the Krath forces began moving immediately. They had been waiting for this moment, planning their assault. Massive war machines rumbled forward, crushing the fields where Minho had once studied beautiful flowers. Soldiers advanced in tight formations, their weapons ready. In the central sanctuary, Yoonji stood before the gathered colonists. Thousands of Velorans crowded into the reinforced building. The last safe place in the colony. Families held each other. Children pressed against their parents. Everyone knew what was coming. My friends, Yunji said, her voice somehow calm despite everything. I will not lie to you. No help is coming. We sent our messages and no one answered. But we are not defeated. We are still here, still together. Whatever happens, remember that we faced the end with dignity. Remember that we loved each other, cared for each other until the very last moment. Tears streamed down faces throughout the crowd. Some people prayed. Others simply waited, holding the hands of those they loved. Minho stood by a window watching the Krath approach. The soldiers were only a few hundred meters away now, moving steadily toward the sanctuary. In minutes, maybe less, they would breach the doors, and then it would all be over. He thought about his plants, his research, the years he had spent learning about life and growth. It seemed so pointless now. What did botany matter when monsters ruled the galaxy? The Krath were 50 meters away. Then the sky exploded. At first, Minho thought it was the Krath firing on the sanctuary, but the sound was different, coming from above rather than around them. He looked up through the window and saw something impossible. Ships. Massive ships dropping out of FTL directly above the colony. But these weren't Krath vessels. They were different, sleeker, with hulls painted in blue and white. Strange symbols marked their sides. One of the ships was enormous, larger than anything in the Krath fleet. It hung in the sky like an angry god, and when it fired its weapons, the sound made the ground shake. What's happening? Someone shouted. I don't know, Yunji whispered, staring at the view screen that showed the sky above. I don't know. On the ground, the Krath soldiers had stopped their advance. They were looking up, their weapons turning toward this new threat. Their commanders were shouting orders, trying to reorganize their forces. They never got the chance. Small craft poured from the unknown ships like angry hornets. They were fighters moving with incredible speed and precision. Someone sat in the cockpit of her fighter, her hands steady on the controls as she dove toward the Krath ground forces. All wings, weapons free, she said into her comm. Let's clear these bastards out. Copy that lead, Junho replied from her wing. Engaging now. The human fighters opened fire, their weapons tearing through Krath positions with brutal efficiency. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield. Krath war machines that had seemed invincible moments ago were reduced to burning scrap. Soldiers tried to fire back, but the fighters were too fast, too skilled. In orbit above, Admiral Taehyung watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The Krath fleet had been caught completely by surprise. They were scrambling to respond, trying to bring their weapons to bear on the human ships. All ships open fire, Taehyung ordered. Focus on their capital vessels. I want them either disabled or destroyed. The Thunder's Wrath spoke first. Its experimental railgun batteries, massive weapons that fired projectiles at a fraction of light speed, locked onto the largest Krath battleship. When they fired, the sound echoed across space. The projectiles struck the Krath vessel's shields, overloading them instantly, then punched clean through the hull. The battleship broke in half, its reactors exploding in a brilliant flash. One down, the weapons officer reported, targeting the next one. The rest of the human fleet joined in. Destroyers unleashed waves of missiles. Carriers launched more fighters to support the first wave. The Krath fleet, which had spent days terrifying the Valorans, suddenly found itself fighting for survival. On the ground, massive human dropships descended through the atmosphere. Their hulls glowed red from friction, but they didn't slow down. They came in fast and hard, landing in a defensive perimeter around the sanctuary. Captain Hunwoo was the first out of his dropship. He wore powered armor that made him look twice his normal size. His rifle was ready, his marines spreading out behind him in perfect formation. Secure the perimeter, he ordered. Nothing gets through to those civilians, nothing. Yes, sir, his marines replied in unison. The Krath forces, confused and disorganized, tried to press their attack. It was a mistake. Human marines, trained in the toughest military in known space, met them with overwhelming force. Kinetic weapons fired with precision. Grenades landed exactly where they needed to. Every human soldier moved with purpose, with training, with a determination that shocked the Krath. These weren't the soft civilians they usually faced. These were warriors, and they had come to fight. Inside the sanctuary, the Valorans watched in stunned silence as the battle raged outside. Jiwoo pulled up external cameras, showing feeds of human soldiers defending their position. He saw one Marine take a direct hit from Krath weapons, the impact sending them flying backward. The Marine got back up, aimed and fired back. They're not retreating, Jiwoo said in wonder. The humans aren't retreating. Who are they? Someone asked. Why are they helping us? No one had an answer. Outside, Sergeant Bora crouched behind cover with her squad, firing controlled bursts at the Krath forces. A Krath soldier charged their position, its forearms wielding weapons. Bora waited until it was close, then triggered her armor's boost system. She moved faster than the eye could follow, closing the distance and slamming into the Krath with her armored shoulder. The alien went down hard. Bora's squad finished it before it could recover. Push forward, Bora ordered. Drive them back. In the sky above, Soman led her squadron through a storm of anti-aircraft fire. The Krath had finally organized their ground defenses, filling the air with deadly plasma bursts. One of her wingmen took a hit and had to pull back, their fighter trailing smoke. This is getting hot, Junho said. Really hot. Stay focused, Soman replied. She spotted a cluster of Krath artillery pieces preparing to fire on the sanctuary. I've got eyes on priority targets. Following me in. She dove, her fighter screaming through the air. Krath weapons tracked her, filling the space around her craft with explosions. She didn't flinch, didn't waver. At the last possible moment, she released her payload and pulled up hard. The missiles struck perfectly, destroying the artillery in a series of devastating explosions. Target eliminated, Selman reported. Moving to next objective, hours passed. The battle raged on. But slowly, steadily, the humans pushed the Krath back. The aliens had expected an easy conquest, a helpless colony. Instead, they found themselves facing a force that fought with precision, courage, and a ferocity that matched their own. Captain Doyun stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching the battle. They had arrived first 3 hours before the fleet, just in time to see the shields fail. For those 3 hours, he had thought they were too late, but Admiral Taehyung had pushed the fleet harder than anyone thought possible. They had arrived just in time. Captain receiving a communication request from the colony, Hana reported. They want to speak with us. Doyun nodded. Put them through. Yunji's face appeared on the screen. She was crying but smiling through her tears. Thank you. Thank you for coming. We thought we were going to die. We thought no one cared. You were wrong, Doyun said simply. We care, and you're not going to die today. Part 2. Humanity's Discovery. The Bridge of the Human Ship. Dauntless was quiet except for the soft beeping of equipment. Captain Doyun sat in his command chair, reviewing reports from the day's patrol. His crew was tired. They had been out here in deep space for 3 months, mapping new jump routes and checking for pirates. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Hana sat at her communications station, half listening to the automated chatter of commercial traffic. Cargo ships announcing their routes, mining stations requesting supplies, the usual background noise of civilized space. She was thinking about home, about Earth, and the hot meal she would eat when they finally got back. When something made her pause, Captain, I'm picking up something strange, she said, adjusting her headset. Strange how? Doyun asked, not looking up from his datapad. It's a distress signal, but it's old, very old, like it's been traveling for days. Hana's fingers moved across her console, isolating the signal and cleaning up the static. It's not human. Definitely not Krath. Wait, running it through the translation matrix now. The bridge went silent as Hana played the recording. A female voice speaking in a language the ship's computer slowly translated into English. The words came through broken and desperate. This is Haven Colony on Talon 7. We are under attack by Krath forces. Requesting immediate assistance. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We have civilians, children. Please help us. In the background of the recording, they could hear other sounds. People crying, alarms blaring, and clearly, unmistakably, a child's voice asking their parent when the bad people would go away. Dohyun sat forward in his chair. How old is that signal? 6 days, Hana replied. It's been broadcasting continuously since then. 6 days. Dohyun stood up and walked to the main view screen. 6 days meant the situation was already desperate when they sent it. Who knows what had happened since then? The colony might already be gone. Where's Talon 7? His navigation officer, a young man named Gunwoo, pulled up a star chart. It's in the frontier zone about 4 light years from our current position. Captain, that's outside our patrol area. I know where it is, Dohyun said quietly. He stared at the map, at the tiny dot representing a world he had never heard of until 30 seconds ago. A world where people were dying while begging for help. His first officer, Commander Yuna, stepped up beside him. Sir, regulations say we should report this to Fleet Command and let them handle it. How long would that take? Following proper channels? Request filed, reviewed, decision made, forces dispatched. 2 weeks minimum, 2 weeks. They would all be dead by then. Do-hyun knew how the Kraith operated. Everyone did. They were one of the few species that made humanity look peaceful by comparison. The Kraith didn't take prisoners for long. They worked them to death or sold them to other slavers. Children were considered valuable because they adapted better to slavery. Play the message again, Do-hyun ordered. Hana did. Once again, the desperate plea filled the bridge. Once again, they heard the child in the background. Do-hyun made his decision. Set course for Talon 7 maximum speed. And Hana, send a message to Admiral Tae-hyung. Tell him we have a situation and we're going to need backup. Yuna looked shocked. Sir, if we divert without authorization, then I'll deal with the consequences later, Do-hyun said firmly. I didn't join the fleet to hide behind regulations while innocent people die. Did you? Yuna was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. No, sir. I didn't. Good. Then let's get moving. The Dauntless changed course, its powerful engines pushing it toward a world in desperate need. But one ship wouldn't be enough against a Krath invasion force. They needed help. Light years away, Admiral Tae-hyung was finishing his dinner when the priority message came through. He was a veteran of 20 years, a man who had fought in border skirmishes and anti-piracy campaigns. He had seen good people die because help arrived too late. He had made himself a promise after the Hendra Station massacre that he would never let that happen again if he could prevent it. He read Captain Do-hyun's message twice, then called his staff together. Gentlemen, ladies, we have a situation, he said, pulling up the message on the conference room display. A colony is under attack by Krath forces. They sent a distress call over a week ago. No one answered. Captain Do-hyun of the Dauntless is moving to investigate, but he'll need support. His intelligence officer, a stern woman named Sujin, frowned. Sir, that sector is outside our jurisdiction. The Galactic Council specifically assigned different response zones. I'm aware, Tae-hyung said. I'm also aware that the Council takes 3 weeks to make any decision, and these people don't have 3 weeks. The Kraith will protest, another officer pointed out. They might claim we're violating their territorial sovereignty. Tae-hyung slammed his hand on the table. I don't care about Kraith protests. I don't care about jurisdiction or sovereignty or any of that political garbage. There are people dying right now. We have the ships, we have the firepower, and we have the ability to help them. So that's what we're going to do. He looked around the table, meeting each officer's eyes. Anyone who has a problem with that can file a formal objection and stay behind. Everyone else, we launch in 2 hours. 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, full combat readiness, no one objected. Within the hour, 6 destroyers, 2 carriers loaded with fighters, and the experimental dreadnought Thunder's Wrath began preparing for departure. Crews ran to their stations. Weapons were armed and tested. Marines checked their equipment and boarded dropships. Engineers pushed the FTL drives to their absolute limits, calculating jump routes that would get them to Talon 7 as fast as physically possible. In the fighter bay of the carrier Righteous Fury, 2 pilots sat in their cockpit checking their instruments. Soman was the squadron leader, a woman who had scored 16 kills in various engagements. Beside her in formation sat Junho, her wingman and best friend. You think we'll get there in time? Junho asked over the comm system. Soman didn't answer right away. She thought about that distress call, about the fear in that alien woman's voice. We better. I didn't join up to let bullies win. Agreed, Junho said. Let's go save some lives. The fleet assembled in space, a formation of human warships ready for battle. Admiral Tae-hyung stood on the bridge of the Thunder's Wrath, looking at the fleet display. 30,000 personnel, hundreds of fighters, enough firepower to level a small moon. Hopefully it would be enough. All ships report ready, Admiral, his communications officer reported. Tae-hyung nodded. Then let's not waste any more time. All ships engage FTL drives. Destination, Talon 7. And someone tell Captain Do-hyun that the cavalry is coming. Yes, sir. The fleet jumped, tearing through space-time, racing toward a colony that had given up hope. Racing toward people who thought they would die alone and forgotten. They were wrong. Humanity was coming, and they were bringing thunder. Part 1. The Siege of Haven Colony. The morning sky over Haven Colony should have been beautiful. Instead, it was filled with darkness. Massive warships blocked out the sun, casting shadows over the peaceful settlement below. Jiwoo stood at his workstation, his hands shaking as he watched the sensor readings climb higher and higher. More ships were arriving every minute. This can't be happening, he whispered to himself, but it was happening. The Krath Dominion had found them. Jiwoo was just an engineer. He fixed power generators and maintained the colony's shield systems. He had never wanted to be a hero. He had come to Talon 7 because it was supposed to be safe, far from the conflicts that plagued other worlds. The Valorans who lived here were peaceful people. They grew food, studied the planet's unique plants, and raised their families in quiet happiness. War was something that happened to other species in other places. Not anymore. The alarms began screaming throughout the colony. Jiwoo ran from his station toward the central control room, his heart pounding in his chest. Other Valorans rushed past him in the corridors, their faces showing the same terror he felt. Parents clutched their children. Elders moved as fast as their legs could carry them. Everyone knew what the Krath did to colonies they captured. They took everything. The people became slaves. The planet became a wasteland. Inside the control room, Yoonji stood at the main console. She was the leader of Haven Colony, chosen for her wisdom and calm nature, but right now her face showed only fear. Her hands moved across the controls, activating every defense the colony possessed. "Jiwoo, I need those shields at maximum power," she said without looking at him. "Right now." "I'm on it," Jiwoo replied, sliding into his seat. His fingers danced across the keyboard, routing every spare bit of energy into the shield generators. The protective barrier around the colony flickered to life, a shimmering dome of blue energy that covered the settlement. It wouldn't be enough. Jiwoo knew it. Yoonji knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. The shields were designed to protect against natural disasters and small accidents. They were never meant to stop a military invasion. The Krath had weapons that could crack planets in half. Their soldiers wore armor that could withstand direct hits from plasma weapons. And they had thousands of troops on those ships above. "Send the distress signal," Yoonji ordered. "All frequencies. Every language. Someone has to hear us." A young Valoran named Haeun worked the communications console. Her voice trembled as she activated the emergency broadcast. "This is Haven Colony on Talon 7. We are under attack by Krath forces. Requesting immediate assistance. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We have civilians, children. Please help us." The message went out into the void of space, traveling at the speed of light toward distant worlds and stations. Haeun repeated it again and again, changing frequencies, adding more details, begging anyone who might be listening to come to their aid. No one answered. Outside, the first Krath drop pods began falling from the sky. They slammed into the ground beyond the shield perimeter, and armored soldiers poured out like angry insects. They were tall creatures, nearly 8 feet high, with thick gray skin and 4 powerful arms. Each one carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Minho pressed his face against the window, watching the enemy force assemble. He was a botanist, someone who spent his days studying flowers and trees. Now he watched as those same fields he had planted were trampled by an invading army. "There are so many of them," he said quietly. The Krath didn't attack immediately. They surrounded the colony, setting up massive weapons pointed at the shield. They weren't in a hurry. They knew the Valorans had nowhere to go, no way to fight back. This was just another conquest for them, another world to strip clean. Inside the shield, life tried to continue, but everyone knew it was temporary. Families gathered together in their homes. Some prayed to old gods. Others simply held each other and waited. Jiwoo worked through the night, adjusting the shields, balancing power distribution, doing everything he could to buy more time. Every few hours, the Krath would test the defenses with a barrage of weapons fire. The shield would hold, but each attack drained more power. The generators were already running hot. He could see the stress readings climbing into dangerous territory. "How long can we hold?" Yoonji asked him during one of her visits to his station. Jiwoo didn't want to answer. He looked at the numbers on his screen, did the calculations in his head, and felt his stomach turn. "Maybe a week. Perhaps less if they attack at full strength." Yoonji closed her eyes. A week wasn't enough time. Even if help was coming, it wouldn't arrive in time. The nearest friendly military force was months away. The Galactic Council moved slowly, arguing about jurisdiction and proper procedures while people died. "Keep trying," she said, putting a hand on his shoulder. Every hour we survive is one more hour for a miracle. Jiwoo nodded, but he didn't believe in miracles anymore. Days passed. The distress signal continued broadcasting, unanswered. Haeun's voice grew hoarse from repeating the same message over and over. The Krath tightened their circle, bringing more weapons to bear. They set up mining equipment, ready to start tearing apart the planet as soon as the colony fell. On the 5th day, the shields began to fail. Not all at once, but in small sections. A flicker here, a weak spot there. Jiwoo worked frantically to compensate. Shutting down non-essential systems, rerouting power, pushing the generators beyond their design limits. "We're losing the eastern section," he reported to Yoonji. "I can't hold it much longer." Yoonji made the hardest decision of her life. Evacuate the eastern district. Pull everyone back to the central area. We'll make our last stand there. Families fled from their homes carrying what little they could. Minho helped guide people to the sanctuary at the colony's center, a reinforced building that was now their only hope. Children cried. Parents tried to comfort them with lies about how everything would be okay. That night, Jiwoo sat alone at his station, watching the power levels drop. His equipment beeped warnings at him. The generators were dying. By morning, maybe noon at the latest, the shields would collapse completely, and then the Krath would come. He thought about his life, the choices that brought him here. He thought about all the things he would never do, never see. He thought about how unfair it was that peaceful people should die while monsters thrived. Most of all, he thought about how no one was coming to save them. The galaxy had abandoned Haven Colony to its fate.